When it comes to introducing the Circumplex, my sense is once over lightly is enough. There are a few key things that I'm interested in Sarah taking away from this part of the debrief. I'd like her to understand north, south, east, west, task, people, satisfaction, security, and for her to get an understanding of what red, green and blue is about. My sense from the early introduction with Sarah is that this profile is probably going to be quite high in green, and it results that it is. And so I take time during this process. What I'm doing is quite deliberately drawing experiences from Sarah's life to our methodology so that she can start to tell stories about what green looks and feels like, what task might feel like, and so on and so forth. What this does is anchor her life experience in place with our methodology, and that allows her to draw conclusions about her data later on. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. Now, of course, we went through it very briefly in the workshop. I just want to spend a little bit more time around it. So, look, my sense around this is that if you think back to where we've come from is an organisation that is really very focused on measuring the things that make a difference in people's lives. And so where the organisation began, our founder here, Clay Lafferty, down here, he was really fascinated by three guiding questions, as it were. And he was concerned around, do high-performing individuals think and behave differently? If they do, can you measure it? And if you can measure it, can you teach it to other people? And of course what we found is that high-performing individuals they think quite differently and behave quite differently to even average-performing individuals. You can measure it and you can teach it to other people. I mean, that's what we've made a business out of over the years. And so all this material is really about trying to understand your thinking and your behavior. And to what extent is it helping you or holding you back? So there's no judgment associated with this. In fact, the only judgment in this would be the judgment that you put on yourself around it. And that's interesting. Some people are quite good at that. And so really it's about understanding what's helping, what's hindering you. So what we have is a circular graph here. And in it we have 12 different styles of behavior. And how these styles of behavior came about was really a collection of theories and research that was well grounded, that was reliable and valid, and was appropriate for what we're working in. So we're interested in thinking and behavioural research. So what we're going to do is when we get the profile, one of the things we're going to do is going to chop it up east to west. And on the outside of the profile, you can just see these things here where we talk about the orientation. Now the orientation is, imagine if you go to another city, you get a sort of tourist map. And one of the things you do is you orientate yourself. So I know, I've got to find which way is the street looking and so on. So the orientation here tells you, are you oriented towards people or task? So those that are oriented more towards people are concerned with relationships, where they fit in, how others perceive them and so on. Those that are more oriented towards task are concerned with outcomes, goals, deliverables, perhaps more rational. Now, there's no right or wrong here. We need a bit of both. What's your sense of where you might be at this point in time? Do you see more task or more relationship?
I think in my role I have to deal with people a bit more, but I'm actually possibly a bit more comfortable with the tasks.
Over this side.
Yes.
Well, see, what's interesting is that we, of course, you want a bit of both.
Yeah.
What we find sometimes is some people are more heavily oriented towards people.
Right.
And so that's great, they have great relationships, but they might not get so much done. And then the converse is the same. We have people who are more focused towards tasks, who get a lot of stuff done, but don't bring people with them. So we're looking for a happy balance between the two. Now, then the next thing we do is we chop it north to south, and now what we have is we bring in a set of needs. And so what this tells us is the extent. So is where is your thinking at? Where is your focus at in the moment at this moment in time around needs? So profiles that are bottom heavy. These are about security needs. So what this means is that, look, all of us worry about something. We all do. We all of us have normal, healthy levels of worry. But as the profile becomes progressively more bottom heavy, what happens is we're now dealing with someone who's gone from worry to deep anxiety, deep anxiety, and so on. Because what's happening is their very security is at risk. So it could be I'm worried about a relationship. It could be worried about a task that I've got to get done. Who knows what it is? And we have to explore that with the individual. But what happens is that these styles down the bottom here are coping styles. coping stuff. Now, they're not bad, but when you cope with something, it's nowhere near as effective as dealing with it. And so the north-south hemisphere thing for me is around coping rather than dealing with the issue here. So here we're more concerned around what could go wrong and how do we mitigate that, keep ourselves safe. Up here, the northern hemisphere is about satisfaction. So we're now concerned with growth, possibility, what could be, a sense of fun and enjoyment in what we do. And so these styles up here enable that. They help you grow and develop and make a contribution. Now, have you come across people who would be more bottom-heavy in this profile? Who might be concerned around security, keeping themselves safe?
Yeah.
What's life like for those people?
Oh, well, I don't know if they get any pleasure out of anything. I think they watching the clock tick.
So it's a challenging place. I mean,
yes,
to some degree, it's more pessimistic, and this is more optimistic.
Yeah.
Now we've got to be careful with such black and white distinctions. But someone who's more bottom heavy.
Would someone fall into this category if their workplace was a difficult place to work in?
Could very well do. See, the interesting thing is that, let's say you and I have the same thing happens to us. How we respond to it can be really different.
Yeah.
So for some people, let's say you have someone, I've worked with people for whom they become ill. And for some people, it is a defining moment in their lives and their life spiral down. I've also worked with people who become ill and it's a defining moment and their life spirals up. So it's not the thing that happens, it's really how you think about it that makes the difference.
Okay.
And so we'll come back to that.
Yeah,
Now, what's it like in the northern hemisphere here? Have you personally experienced life up there? A sense of satisfaction, joy, contribution, fun?
I'm not sure about joy. Oh, a bit of fun.
Yes.
Certainly satisfaction. Yep. I certainly used to feel some relief and satisfaction if I could deliver on something great for a client, or and they were really pleased with it. That was fantastic. Or sometimes being acknowledged for what you'd done was really nice too. Yes or no? Certainly some really satisfied moments. Yeah.
So, do you get a sense of how life can be quite different in these different places?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what we're trying to do is help people increase the amount of time they spend up in this northern part rather than down here. Now, we all have times where we move down here, and so we need to understand what might be causing that. Now, let's have a look at the colours. So green sits down here, and green is about safety or security through people. So green is about keeping other people happy, doing things the way they've always been done, making sure that you're a good follower and doing what you're told, waiting for direction, and avoiding things altogether. So I think about green as being like camouflage. Now, I'm explaining green at quite a significant level. So there's safety in numbers. So I blend in, I do what's expected. And so as long as I belong, I'll be okay. Now, green has some value, of course it does. But what do you think happens to someone who is overly focused on belonging?
Well, I find that quite a tricky one because, so much of what my business, and I'm sure it's others, delivers, working as a team, getting on with your colleagues, keeping the door open, making time for people. And that would seem, I suppose that's not avoidance, but that would seem to wanting to please people.
You need some of it, don't you?
Yeah.
So here's an example. You've got teenage kids at the moment, yeah? And so one of the things I think about teenagers, there's a sense that teenagers can be quite rebellious, right? But what happens in a teenage group if you don't, wear the right clothes, listen to the right music, and all that sort of stuff? What happens?
Oh, well, well, I don't know if they get ostracised, but they worry that they're going to.
And so the fear is not fitting in. And so what happens is to belong is that you perhaps turn down some of your uniqueness to blend in.
Okay.
So that's the concept that the challenge around green.
Right.
Consequence was the word I was looking for. Consequence around green.
Right.
And so some green has some value, but the more you do of it, we lose sense of who the individual is.
You
So
just doing everything for everyone else.
Absolutely. So that's green. We call green passive defensive. Now, when we come over here, red is aggressive defensive. So green's often seen as sort of flight. Red is fight, so the greatest form of defense is attack. Now, the interesting thing is both are very much around security, different strategies to keep yourself safe. So here you blend in green you blend in red you stand out. And so what red is a strategy about, and again I'm explaining it at the extreme level, is about, you got an idea? I'll tell you 10 reasons why your ideas won't work. Because maybe some of your ideas challenge me. So you can see this, there's a lot of this stuff around. Power, this is something I've got that you don't, I'm going to use to get what I want. So I could be older, younger, more experienced, and so on. This is about how well I compare, making sure that I compare better. So as long as I'm better than, so I'm better than, I'm, better than the other person.
It's just really hard in business because, everyone's teams are competing with each other, and also, you have KPIs and you've got leader lists, and people who are at the top of the list get holidays and others who don't. Anyway.
It's tricky, isn't it? Yeah. So there's a lot of this stuff. See, lots of stuff around, and about being really pedantic about detail. This one here is. So red, again, red has some value. It does. Is that it will. So red is very much about these results. So you get plenty of results out of here. What do you think this high drive for results might cost you, though?
Oh, I think it just wears you out.
It does. It wears people out, and it doesn't bring people with them. So again, both of these have some value, but it's about, to what extent might it be unraveling some of that value over time. So lastly, we then come up to the top here, we have this blue stuff called the constructive styles. So these are the ones obviously closest to this satisfaction stuff. So very much around seeing what's possible, challenging myself, setting my own goals, working with a deep set of values and having a sense of contribution, fun and enjoyment, seeing the absolute best in others. This humanistic encouraging stuff is not about being nice. Nice sits down in green. This is the tough love sometimes. This is about, telling people the truth with compassion to help them grow, and about being friendly, cooperative, and using influence to get things done. So blue for me is really very much around styles that help people enable, to get the most out of life, make a contribution. All 12 are normal. We all have all 12 styles, and I can think of, in my own life, I use all 12 styles to varying degrees at different stages. I know when I'm tired and grumpy, I'm much more likely to be down here. When I'm at my best, I'm up here, and so on. The point is that what we're going to look at is where do you show up in this profile? And I kind of think of it as, it's almost like a map of where you spend your time and energy. If I go back to those 3 initial questions, the most effective people we found, we all have the same amount of time in the day. I assume you only have 24 hours as well. You might wish you had a few more. But what we know is that the most effective human beings were really clear about where they put their time and energy. And the most effective ones put predominantly their time and energy up here. It's not saying red and green's bad. It's not. It's just less effective. And so what we're going to do through this process is understand what might you be doing out of red and green. What does it give you? Because we all do these things for a reason. And what does it cost you?
It's this perfectionistic one is interesting to me because I can understand that list. They're setting unrealistic goals, creating self-induced stress. I've probably got a bit of that, but it's a funny one because it's in red, but it would seem that wouldn't most people want to try and get things right?
No question around that, and it's not a problem at all. Interestingly, it's a good question. See this heavy line in the middle here? Yeah. That's the 50th percentile. So my sense is, and what we found predominantly through the research, is that red and green below that line, absolutely fine. So perfectionistic below the 50th percentile, just sort of great attention to detail. It will, real focus on the things that matter. Great attention to detail. As it moves over that line, you now start to become, I think of it as being somewhat myopic. You become overly focused on the minutiae at the extent of the bigger picture. The bigger picture sits up here. Achievement sits next to it for a reason. Achievement is much more focused on what's required to make this successful. I mean, look, forgive me, somewhat tongue-in-cheek. Perfectionistic is about what will cause this to fail. And so, I ask people that ask me questions around perfectionistic. If your primary driver is to avoid failure and you are successful, what have you achieved? you've avoided failure, haven't you?
Yeah.
Now, the primary driver in achievement is to be successful, to be effective, to make a difference. So if your driver in achievement is, what do I need to do to make this successful, and you are successful, you have succeeded. And so the two are quite different places. Psychologically, huge difference between the two. So it's not saying thou shalt have no red and green.
No.
Some red and green's fine. It's the extent to which is it moving over into the less effective aspects of it. So that's the Circumplex. There's bags of information in this material I'm going to give you, and we've got a number of follow-up sessions to go through to check in around this. And so what I wanted to do was give you a bit of an overview around it, and you're going to have questions along the way, and that's great. Now, you're going to get two pieces of feedback. The first one is your self-report about where you see yourself at the moment. Now, given the introduction we've done around this Circumplex, where did you identify with mostly?
I can't say I can completely remember.
What about maybe at a colour level? Did you think, I can see myself in that?
Oh, look, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know about avoidance, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of the greens there.
Yep.
There might be a bit of perfectionism.
I think there was some interest in this one, wasn't there? Yeah.
Well, just because I don't sort of understand how in a business where we try and get things right first time, why there isn't some how that could be seen to be a negative. But from what you're saying, it's your how high it goes and the impact it has.
And at the risk of being slightly pedantic, the thing to be really careful about is to see red and green as negative. Is judgmental.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that when you get your feedback, when I work with people who see red and green as bad, for want of a better description, they are very good at judging their own feedback. And that's not overly helpful to help you move forward. The most constructive thing to do is to look at the feedback and say, okay, I understand what it's saying. There's some areas there I think I could get better at. How do I do that? If you're down here in the bottom of the Circumplex, you're going to be very judgmental. Oh, aren't I terrible? And things like that, and so on. So some a little bit of the green down here, perhaps some perfectionistic.
I'm thinking.
Okay, let's find out.